As we get started, I want to make sure that I say thank you to a whole bunch of collaborators that are a part of this project. So the webinar series really started based on a project between Masoud Hashemi at UMass, Heather Darby at UVM, and Rick Kersbergen at UMaine for a SARE grant where they are studying a variety of different grazing alternatives and forage season extension options. So if that is something that you are interested in trying on your own farm, the grant does have some stipend money to support farmers that want to try alternative forage. So get in touch with me. My email is in all of the emails that you get with the registration, and I can put you in touch with the right person if that's something that you want to do. I also want to make sure I say thank you to Megan of the Vermont Grass Farmers. We are co-hosting, really sort of try-hosting this event today between the SARE collaborators, Vermont Grass Farmers, and the Livestock Institute of Southern New England, who I also work with. They're providing administrative support and funding for today. And that comes from the Cedar Tree Foundation. And the Cedar Tree Foundation provided funding for what is the newly formed New England Grazing Network. It is a whole lot of people that you already know and love throughout New England that are various grazing professionals, both public agencies and private agencies, working together to try to enhance grazing throughout New England. So you can find us online at our website, our Facebook, or at our Instagram. And with that, I of course want to make sure that I introduce Troy, AKA, or his alias, the Grass Whisperer. And one of the reasons that we really wanted Troy to speak today is not only is he, a really phenomenal, engaging speaker, but also he brings a lot of stories and pictures about the reality of farming and where the observations and the what if scenarios are needed and how those are tools in the field. And he's going to talk a little bit today about Linga Grazing, which I'm excited for him to explain to you. And I really find his practical sense, and I think a lot of other people do, as both a blessing and a curse, especially for someone trying to sell something, right? The best thing is his willingness to share knowledge and to brainstorm opportunities through a holistic lens. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy. This is going to be a little bit of a different style than our previous webinars. Megan and I are going to stay on and we'll have some chatter. But I think Troy is going to shoot for about 30-35 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to questions. If you submitted a question in advance, he's either going to include them in his presentation today, or I will try to field them afterwards. So with that, Troy, it's all yours.
Okay. And you're going to move the slides, right, Sam?
Yep, just tell me when.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. Around the nation, I looked at the list, and there's folks from Texas all the way to Maine, Canada, everywhere. So I hope you're having a good night and you got an hour to kill on the patio or in the pool, or you're sitting in a cool spot. So this will be my first webinar, so I'm kind of nervous. I've been thinking about it all day. I'll be trying to say the right words. I won't say too many ums. That'll be very engaging. Hopefully that will happen. What I find difficult a little bit is where I come from. So this is a context from the Northeast. And so those folks that aren't in the Northeast, hopefully you'll get some tidbits and some stuff to think about. The reality is that I live in upstate New York, just down from the snow belt. And we have perennial pastures that are mostly orchard grass. I'm not in fescue nation. Some of my friends are, and they can do a lot better stockpiling than I. And so I'm gonna try to mix a little bit of stockpiling that has to do with maybe fescue and other things. But most of the stuff is going to be on my own land in my own context, what I see that's important. And, I'm going to make some statements. I'm going to make some aha moments for me. Really what's happened is since 2010, I have been planning to stockpile pastures. And so I thought about it today. I'm basically starting my stockpile today, whatever I'm thinking about, my program. And I also looked, this webinar forced me to look back at my record. So I got grazing charts from 12 years ago. So I was able to look back at some of the things like the weather and frost dates and some other things that are interesting. So I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know. So the context I have is I'm not going to plow. So a lot of things I'm going to talk about, we're not going to do. So if you're asking me questions, I'll either defer or I'll try to answer them. But we're sort of in our own little world. And if you got a lot of questions, I highly recommend going to my mentors, Jim Garish, Greg Judy, Russ Wilson. Those guys have showed me the way. And what's actually happened is I technically have only been winter grazing twice in 10 years because most winter doesn't start till the 22nd of December. And only twice have I got past that. So I hate to burst your bubble, but that's kind of the reality that I have. So if you want to go to the next slide there, Sam. Dr. Sam, I mean. I looked up Sam. She's a PhD, pile higher and deeper. Woo!
Yeah, you're not kidding.
There's your shout out. So scale, you may be big, way bigger than us with a lot more animals. You may be way smaller. You may not have beef. You may not have sheep. You may have sheep. You may have goats. You have horses, dairy. So our operation is a custom grazing operation. We don't own any cows. I'm basically going to be talking about the last 10 years. So this is our home farm. We have had in the past a rental farm or two. So I'm just going to mostly talk about our home farm and what we're doing, but you can see kind of the layout. Last night I put the elevation. So at the highest point, it's 1150. And down by the house, it's 800. So there's 350 feet of elevation from top to bottom. So if you look at the layout, you'll see there's a stream running through. That's a sole source aquifer that we protect, we graze through, we collect the water, and we do gravity water. The red are the paddocks. They may or may not have a fence on it because I need to delineate the fields that I'm managing. And you'll see that the organic matter is higher at the bottom than it is at the top. And that is because my great-great-grandparents spread all the manure on the bottom because back in the day, there was a lot of snow and they didn't go to the top of the farm. So it's my goal for my lifetime is to try to get the top fields performing like the bottom fields. And so organic matter is one of those things that is easily measured. You can really tell what's going on. So we basically custom graze for the last 8 years. We out of the 10, we custom grazed organic dairy heifers. We're certified organic, beef cows, and actually some conventional dairy heifers. That was a variable stocking rate. So they would come in May and leave August 10th. Lately, we're into grass finishing 100% beef, no more dairy heifers. So things are different now than they were 10 years ago, and I'll try to highlight that a little bit. The main thing is goals have changed, our goals. I say ours, it's my family's goals. I'm 56 years old. I got 3 other jobs, and I'm trying to find life balance. So we gave up some rental farms, and life has its way of working out. So my context is that. Is that good, Sam? Okay.
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
I'm sorry. There's a little bit of a, okay, there we go. A little bit of a delay on the slide. Sorry.
So Linga Grazing. So do you know what Linga Grazing is in French? Linga Grazing. I wanted to say it in French, but it's more like Linga Grazing. Okay, that was a dry sense of humor. I get it. But basically, Linga Grazing isn't anything special other than I put a label on it because most of the things that we manage for, we see. And the grass whisperer sees the little things and then he tries to think how it affects the big things. And so instead of you keep walking by something every day, you don't see it, and then that one time where you linger, you see, I don't know, dung beetles, or you see something different. You see a plant getting attacked by a pest, or you see a cow eating a thorny horse nettle. You know, why is that? So a lot of this has to go back to our active observation, and so that's why I coined the phrase. I like it. It's not management intensive. It sure is, sort of. It's not mob grazing. It's not rotational prescribed grazing. Da, 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 da. It's just something to. It's a tagline. I get it. You know, maybe I'll be known for it. Maybe there'll be a book, Linga Grazing 101. Okay, Sam. So I'd like to say that I had help from Sam and Megan on this because there was I know that you love word slides, so I made a ton of them, and then I got shot down, and they said no word slides, no. So we really did try to help the audience by not going crazy on the words. So Stockpiling 101, what is it? So if I had to come up with a phrase, I basically call it a deferred forage that you're going to use later on. And it can be in the summer, could be in the spring, could be in the fall, could be in the winter. But you are deferring some forage or some crop like cover crops, corn or whatever. You're deferring it, you're letting it rest to feed animals. So the next question is, you know, why do it? Well, I do it because it makes me money. So the more on a custom grazing farm, grazing days are money. So the more grazing days, the more money. And the good news is the more I graze somebody's cows at $1.20 a day, they're up here in central New York, we have bought in feed and wintered cows, and basically our winter feeding cost is about $2.65 up to $2.80 a day. That seems high, but when you figure all your labor and tractors, so $1.20 versus $2.65 is a big jump. So my customers want me to graze their animals for $1.20 a lot quicker. Or more. They want more grazing days from me. They make more money, and they don't have to buy as much of that expensive feed. So can you do it? So yes, you can. You just have to plan, and your plan and your reality and your intelligence are all going to be tested. And just a quick story, my friend Dina Brewster out in Connecticut, she did some stockpiling with 20 sheep, and she basically used the margins around the orchards and around the vegetable plots and came up with a plan. And by the time Christmas came around, she made $1,000 extra on 20 sheep. And you're thinking, what? $1,000? Yeah. Because in Connecticut, hay is $7 to $8 a bale. So she saved a ton of money on hay bought in. And so you can do it. You just have to figure out how that's going to work. And stockpiling doesn't mean you're never going to feed hay again. For us in the Northeast, unless climate change really comes into full swing, we're going to have lousy weather. Where other people live, Texas, Missouri, other places that have fescue, maybe you won't have to feed hay, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to feed some feed. That's just smart.
I think this would be, Troy, that's a perfect lead-in for our 2 polls that we wanted to throw up.
Oh yeah, our polls.
So we haven't actually tried our polls before live, so I'm going to, let's see how this works for everybody. All right, the poll is in progress, so everyone should be able to see it. I see the responses coming in. I'm going to give you just a few minutes, not a few minutes, just a few seconds to do these. And I'll put the results up and we'll show you the second one.
Troy, can you see the poll?
I can.
Okay, great.
I can actually take the poll, I think. It says please select. Oh, we don't vote. Okay, never mind.
Well, you can if you want, but so for our attendees, we're trying some of our new tricks and tricks and tools that we have on this webinar platform tonight. So I'm glad to see this poll working. Okay, cool. So let's see. I'm going to close the poll. And
what's the other one?
Well, let me put up the
Oh,
result.
that's so cool.
Yeah, great. Glad it works.
Yeah.
So Troy, do you want to walk us through your thoughts on this poll?
I was going to defer it to later.
Later? Okay. So I'll put the other one up, but it's great to see, a lot of people are in good shape on land. So let's put up our next poll. All right, here's our second one.
This one's important. Well, they're both important, but. So everybody should know that, and let's see, you should know that that cost very quickly. $2 or more. Wow, 24%, 50 cents or less.
Although that 18%, Troy, I'm sure you have some feelings.
No, okay. All right. Well, that just gets us in the ballpark.
Great.
Okay, we're already 20 minutes in. Ow! Okay.
No pressure.
No pressure. So, Kick the Hay Habit is a book I highly recommend. Jim has mentored me. I believe in what he's doing, and you almost have to believe, and you've got to give it a try if you want to. So I suggest find a mentor. It could be somebody in your neighborhood, somebody online, somebody you read from, but it's good to get somebody have advice. You should do your homework, meaning finances, and your animal to acre ratio. Can you do it? What is it going to cost? What your wintering cost is? How you're going to get that down? And could you use some extra money? That's the incentive for me. Not soil health, which is a good one. Animal performance is good, but I like money. So that's why I'm doing it. Okay, next. So unfortunately for stockpiling or grazing in general, there's a lot to think about. So this is just an exhaustive list that you can get at the end of the presentation. I believe it's on a SARE grant. It's something that helps you make decisions, all the things you should consider. That's crazy. Ian Michelinus talked about chaos. There's a lot of chaos in there, trying to figure out your goals and cow numbers and when you should do this and when you should clip and when you should go on vacation. And there's a lot of bottlenecks and things you need to consider. So that's part of this whole process of moving towards extending grazing. It doesn't just start today. It should have started months ago, or it should, okay? So these are statements, I suppose. So for me, stockpiling is forage inventory management. Ooh, for FIM, forage inventory management. So stockpiling is nothing more than an add-on of a total grazing plan, in my opinion. The management of a grazing operation and should have a plan and should have monitoring and practiced all year. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna graze this way and then I'm gonna do stockpiling. It's sort of all in one. I was sort of the naysayer. If you want to extend the grazing season, I was looking to somebody else to kind of do it for me. I got to do it. So if I want it to happen, I've got to figure out how to do that. And I would say you take it in small bites. You do a little bit the first year, maybe you go all in, maybe you got partners. Start small and work your way up. That's way you won't get overwhelmed. So the other thing, if you're overstocked, overgrazed, and under management, I don't see the opportunity for you unless you change some of those parameters. And you must know your goals, what you want to do for your operation. You need to know your feed costs and things. It's almost a budget. You should do yourself a budget, a financial budget, or a cost analysis of doing extended grazing in some way, because there's a lot of ins and outs to doing it. Okay, Sam. So you're going to be measuring, you're going to be allocating, you're going to be looking, you're going to be planning, you're going to be a soothsayer. You're going to say, okay, in 60 days, I'm going to have this much feed. You're going to have to monitor your grass growth. So I've been looking at a paddock for 8 days. It's grown 8 inches. So it's an inch a day. That's awesome. If it's an eighth of an inch, that's not as awesome. If it's 2 inches, so these things play into what your inventory is. And again, the highly weather dependent, you have to keep adapting and get your rest periods and recovery periods the way they need to be. If you got a lot of rain, you can get away with it. But I've been through 3 dry periods in 10 years that really do tax your ability to manage and how much you can actually stockpile, set aside. So stockpiling can be done any time of the year for different reasons. So you can stockpile in the summer for drought reserve. You can stockpile for winter grazing. You can stock and mob like we do for fertility. So the picture down in the corner is a field that we wintered on in all winter, and then we got it flattened out and let it rest until we were going on vacation. We used that in August for a 7-day vacation. So then we go ahead and mob it and knock it down. And so that's stockpile forage in August. Different things for different reasons. The other thing about stockpiling, it's an awesome tool for plant health, soil health, because if you let your plants recover and rest, there's a darn good chance that they're going to contribute to the seed bank next year. And that's management money well spent, because if you don't have to buy $4 a pound seed, you can grow it on your own farm. That's awesome. Okay.
And Troy, this is something that I wanted to get you talk a little bit more about, because when I first saw this the other day, I thought, that's contradictory to everything we say. Don't let it go to seed, don't let it go to seed. But can you talk a little bit about, in addition to the seed bank, why you make that decision for your own, lifestyle, work-life balance?
The stockpiling or the seeding?
The seeding.
So some of that I can't control. When, I live in the Northeast. So when you got a lot of red clover and you let it rest, you're going to have a big seed bank. That goes back to what kind of stockpile do you want to grow? Do you want it really highly productive? Do you want to finish animals on it, or is it maintenance? But trying to do so, some things are out of your control. If it's raining a lot of times the clovers in our neck of the woods will go, they'll flower, and they don't look all that palatable, and so the orchard grass really likes it. And again, you'll be seeding. People say, well, how much seed do you use a year? And I say none, because I don't know how many pounds of seed in a stockpiled field of red clover and orchard grass, but there's significant amounts. So we're pushing right now, we're pushing 40 to 50% clover. And it's because of the recovery and the rest, the recovery and letting that seed out. Now, it doesn't have to be every field. You can pick your fields that need help. That's a good way to do it. You just let it rest. And same with wintering. Wintering, we tear it up, it doesn't look pretty, and then we let it rest, and we get a lot of orchard grass seed getting trampled. So, we're creating what we want. That's what we're doing. We think it's good. And if it ain't, I don't know. Still good. So I saw a lot of questions on species composition of stockpile, grass and things. Here in the Northeast, or at least on our farm, we have a cool season perennial pasture, mostly orchard grass, clover, forbs, dandelions, knapweed, everything. So for me, it can be a limiting factor because it's not fescue. Fescue is the darling of, holding up in the wintertime. I'm just not willing to transform my farm into fescue. I'm not excited about that. I would love to send my cows to a fescue farm somewhere. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that, but we're not doing that. So that's a limiting factor on our farm, what we can actually grow and keep standing in the wintertime or in the late fall, winter. We always have feed on hand because shit's gonna happen. It happens overnight. We get hurricanes. Most of our bane is wet snow now, unfrozen ground, mud, and so we have to have choices and tools. And so we always have to have outside feed because we just never know. I can't sleep at night knowing my cows that I manage may or may not be in great shape. So it might be my problem. The cows are probably fine, but for me, it's a personal choice. And that animal performance and welfare consciousness is always around us grass farmers, especially when we're out in the public, or somebody sees cows in the snow with no feed and pushing snow. We must be accountable for that. So the other part of the management of the stockpile is I may not get it all in this before the winter comes in, but I certainly have been consistently grazing 2 weeks earlier in the spring. And so you can say, well, that's good. Still more grazing days. Okay. Wow. So I have to put this in here because it's a money thing. So there is a ton of resources out there talking about common practices to boost forage growth. And I have taken the tack that I will manage it better throughout the year to get this stockpile, because all the other ones cost money, more money. That's not to say that you can't do it. I just would love to folks to put a pencil to making these decisions on how much fertilizer, how much does it cost per acre, all the things that we know we can do, plan an annual, interseed, clipping, you can rent other land, move cows. So our common practice for spending money is we buy hay or baleage, because that guarantees us feed. So if I put on commercial fertilizer, chicken litter, or whatever, and it doesn't rain for 30 days, I can't guarantee I have feed. And so I have seen wrecks after wrecks after wrecks. You know, they put the seed in the ground at $4 a pound or $5, $3, so many dollars per acre, and then it doesn't rain, or it rains too much, or I don't know, the locusts come in and the grasshoppers and and they spend a bunch of money and they don't have anything. And so that's why I buy feed, because feed, I either get the feed for free or the fertilizer from the hay for free. So a $40 bale's got $40 worth of hay in it, or $40 of fertility. So that's kind of where we are at. But close to home, if you can make it happen and you got the right weather conditions, by all means, pencil it out. The big thing is timing. You want to hit it when you're going to start stockpiling, and have a plan of when that's going to happen. And like tonight, we got a half an inch of rain. If I was going to do something, I should have done it this afternoon. So, you know, timing is everything in trying some of these practices, but they do cost money out the door. You just better hope that you get your investment back. Okay. So these are a continuation of the ahas, things that are happening to us here. The unpredictable weather and moisture. So if it doesn't rain, we don't get as much stockpile. And if you're tight on land and you need forage and you don't get rain, and you've committed a lot of time and energy and you still got to buy hay, you are defeated. I'm defeated. I've been defeated a couple times. Or you grow it and it's doing good, and then in November, you get 3 hurricanes in a row and it turns to mush. Or you get a wet snow and 25, I think I've lost 30 acres one time of beautiful stockpile into worm food.
Troy, can you just explain a little bit more on this? Because there was a question about this too, in how that then plays out in the spring for you. If you lose your stockpile due to weather or something like that, you've grown it all, does this play into your still getting on the ground earlier in the spring? Can you just explain that a little bit? There's a question.
So I was defeated because I was considering it a waste, and what actually happened was it really helped the soil health. The bugs underneath during the winter time had more to eat, and so they turned that into more organic matter, and the next year my pastures were even better. So I considered it sad face. I lost $1,500 worth of grazing, and then I got that 2 weeks back in the spring. So again, you may feel like it's waste. My problem is you can't predict when it's going to have a heavy wet snow or a hurricane, so you got to have feed, because that bottom picture was during my organic certification. My inspector was there. It wasn't real pretty. So the ahas, the part is, what's hard is predicting growth. You know, when you say I'm going to start stockpiling 60 days from my first frost, you know, you've got to have a plan. You got to predict the growth. You got to keep measuring, and you got to plan out the utilization. I mean, there's a lot to it. Again, get a buddy. So I actually went back and looked at this frost part because folks talk about why August 10th. Well, so August 10th, 11th is 60 days from my first frost date, like killing frost. And so 60 days you could stockpile longer than that, shorter than that. For us, 60 days will give us the highest quality stockpile forage to eat to finish animals. If I wanted a little bit older, I'd have to put a maintenance animal on that. So when I look back at my my grazing charts from 10 years, which is a darn good reason to have one, I actually look back, and my first 5 years, back in 2010 to 2015, my average, so the killing frost date is supposed to be October 10th. That 5 year period, it was the 16th. And so the last 5 years, it's been November 7th, my killing frost date. So things are weird. So maybe I shouldn't even bother starting stockpiling thinking until September 7th, if my killing frost date is going to be moved to November. It's one of them climate change, whatever. And a little tidbit I got from my friend Paris Reedhead. He talks about when you get your first thunderstorm in the spring, 6 months from that first thunderstorm, you're going to have your killing frost. And you can say, well, you're full of crap, Bishop. And so I actually recorded what I thought is our first thunderstorm on May 15th, which would put us at a killing frost date of November 15th. So we're going to have a late frost, which means more growth, and so I don't know if you can take it to the bank, but I have proven that a couple times, and so it's intriguing.
I like it. You've heard it here first for the Northeast.
It
has happened. It's crazy.
So Troy, what happens when you start stockpiling on August 10th and now it's October 10th and there's no frost in sight? Do you let it keep going, or do you start grazing it?
I start grazing, and then you get regrowth. The problem is you don't know when it's going to freeze, so you don't want to take your plants down very low. The other part of Neil Dennis talked about, when you got a big heavy sward, the frost doesn't really kill everything. And so it regrows. And so lately, in the last 5 years, we don't have any frozen ground. So we have perpetual Novembers that continue this the grass keeps growing. And if the grass keeps growing, then the cows will keep eating it. But there's a point of no return. When they keep clipping it down, you're basically diminishing the root reserves. That's bad. So, so you got to be careful. Got to be careful. Okay, next one. Holy cow, we're really.
I was going to give you a time check, but for our audience members, I'll just say we knew in advance that we were gonna go over. So,
my goodness.
we'll head out and take questions.
Oh. So, for me, the forage quality, the feed quality's got to match the animal performance. If it doesn't, then you're out of luck. So if we're finishing animals or grazing, growing dairy heifers, you got to have good feed. And so that's why we stockpile the way we do, and we get really nice feed. I'll show you the tests here in a minute. So you got to match that. You got to figure out what's the best way to utilize that, and what animal class. The other part of this rationing, you ration the forage, and you're rationing out the forage, and you're also finding that animal performance balance. So, if you take it too low, it's too old, your animal performance goes down. Maybe you've taken it too low, and so there's a fine line there. Again, it would be great if it was cold and dry. It would be a lot less of a fine line. But when you get into wet snow, sleet, and freezing rain, and just plain old rain making mush, it's almost more important to find that balance. So Victor, I think Victor's on tonight. He talked about leaving more residual and not hurting the plant tillers. So I believe that he is correct. So if people talk about, well, you know, take half, leave half. Well, if it's only 10 inches tall and you take it down and you leave nothing for overwintering, that's bad. So no self-respecting hay guy is going to take his prize hay fields and take them much lower than 4 or 5 inches. I don't believe we should either. But it is a hard thing not to take it down, because you want to get all the feed you can because you set it aside for 60 days, and that's money. And here's the kicker. And I've proven it, but I don't know why. I took some fields and I grazed it right down to nothing, like 2 inches, and I didn't see any detriment to the sward, whether I did that or I left 6 inches. So I don't know what to say about that. I believe that the plants were rested, fully recovered. Then you took and didn't leave much, but actually being shorter and fully rested, when the spring came, there was a lot of sun getting down to those plants, and it took right off. So I don't know. Maybe that's an agronomy question for Sam. I don't know how that acts, but I haven't found it to be as critical as some would think. But I'm not an agronomist.
I'd speculate, and I'm sure someone's gonna reply in the questions and disagree with me, but I would speculate that part of it is, you know, these plants have already gone through their cold acclimation period. You know, they've had frost, they've had increasing cold, they've already responded to all of these day length signals, temperature signals saying, hey, it's winter time, it's time to go dormant. So they've already redirected their energy to their crown. They're not planning on regrowing. Like, their biology has totally changed. So usually we want to leave that residual so that you can do photosynthesis, so you can regrow. But also part of it is you don't want to damage the crown. And that's the big problem with grazing too low, is you risk damaging the crown, which is the point of regrowth. So I would guess that, one, you had the biology on your side, and that two, you know, you got lucky and they didn't rip up that crown too much.
Of course, my pastures have been around for 30 years, so it might be different than a younger sward. Okay, next one. Dr. Sam. So something that is very apparent when you're going into this is cold weather requires more feed and more energy. So we actually had a winter pasture walk here, which was super fun, super awesome fun. Getting a bunch of farmers, for whatever reason, I had them get on their hands and knees, take their hat off, and burrow in the snow like a cow would to get feed. And people were freezing.
Did they do it willingly?
They did, because, you know, I was taking pictures, and, you know, we were all, I don't know, it was the first one ever. So everyone realizes that it takes a lot of energy to push snow, you know, and you need to have more feed available. And so that is a great way to, you know, send the point home that, you know, in the winter, they just eat more. And so whether you think your stockpile is, you know, tall and everything else, when it starts dropping below 20 and you get wind or 10, they're just going to eat you out of house and home. So it goes quicker. So, you know, you had this plan of so many days, and then, you know, wet rain or cold, and they just eat. So again, being flexible with what feed you have. The question we had last night, we talked about, you know, when do you give up and just feed hay? Megan mentioned, you know, giving up. Whoa, giving up. You're being smart. So there was point in my life, I believe it was in 2012, I had a few of my own cows, and Greg Judy always said, which I'm throwing him under the bus tonight, but he said, you know, they can go through snow, they can graze through snow. So I made them. And so we had a pretty big snow, and what actually happened was it was pretty deep, and it stressed the cows out and they died. And so I lost about $3,000 worth of calves, you know, like 500 weights. And that was not fun. And so I called up Greg and I said, hey, they're supposed to be able, you said, I read the book, this is the way. And he goes, you're stupid. You're stupid. You weren't using common sense. When it gets that way, feed the hay. Don't be a hero. And you know, when it costs you $3,000 or it costs you some cows' lives because of your mistake, it really does hurt. So that's why I always have hay around. I always have the tools because I get too stressed out. And so that plays into this. I have to have animals reasonably well bedded down, whether it's next to a woods with leaves or with rolling out some hay or whatever, because can you imagine? Well, I know you can, but if you're on wet snow and your hide's a little wet, you know, it's not very comfortable. And when we're doing finishing here, or, you know, high quality animals, you don't want them under stress. So a few bales of hay rolled out, give them someplace to lay down, even when they're stockpile grazing, to me is important. And so those places and those shelters and sacrifice areas, along with the water, they have to be seamless. You can't be thinking about it. If there's a storm coming, and we all have the Weather Channel, we're not from the plain community. We all have technology. We know where the snow's coming or the hurricane. Move those animals to those appropriate places. And so I have waterers that, you know, fill up and they drink. And then if for some reason they break or something, they freeze up, I go right to the creek. I have to, you know, I open up a gate, break the ice. I have to be flexible, and watering points, shelter, sacrifice areas, and everything else. I got to be really flexible, because before I wasn't, and I was stressed out, and that's bad. We need to be flexible, and so the best experience is something that after it happened, and that's what happened to me. Okay.
Gentle reminder, it's 7:52.
Yeah, I know. That's crazy.
There's a couple more slides, but we'll be okay.
Jeez, I thought I was talking pretty quick. So in 2014, I did a whole series. You can go back and look at it. It's pretty interesting. Because I put myself out there. I was the, you know, I held up the flag. I'm going to do this, and here's what it looked like. My problem with the stockpiling experience is the variable stocking rate. When you have custom grazed cows and they don't go anywhere, you're not variable. So having either got a, Jim Garish talked heavily about, if you want to extend your grazing season, you got to be stocked appropriately. So either a variable stocking rate where you can diminish your cow numbers, or, you know, sheep numbers or animal numbers. Or if you've got so many numbers you need to carry, you got to figure out how to do that. We got into too many cows on not enough acres. And then you throw drought in there, or dry times, or no rain, and all this other stuff. There's too many cows. So if you want to continue to plan to do better on stockpiling, you better have a better stocking plan for that extended grazing period. You'll be lower. So we're generally at 2 acres per animal unit, or a little bit more. Again, I talked about, we start at August 10th, because that's 60 days back from our first killing frost, which I told you is not true. I'm thinking we're going to be making an extra month's worth of grazing money. So we continue to monitor the growth. We measure. I got an inch of growth every day. The last 8 days, that's good. We pray for moisture. So my ideal time is pray for moisture, August, September, and then be dry, completely dry, like a drought, October, November, December, January, February, and then rain again. That'd be awesome. But it doesn't happen in the Northeast. Probably happens in the plains of Alberta or someplace else, but not here. I did measure my field out here. We're definitely striving for over 3,000 pounds of dry matter per acre. I measured mine today. I'm at 4,800. And I'm only going to take a little bit of it. You know, that was my next strategy here. But because we got elevation, our grazing stockpiling plan is to try to get them off the top of the hills before the shitty weather comes. And that's from experience, because hauling hay or doing stuff up there is pretty rough. Okay. So the 3 strategies. So you'll find if you've researched this at all, there's lots of strategies, but what we've done is we set aside specific fields, so many acres, you know, 30, 40 acres for full recovery, and then we graze the other ones normally. That's freaking awesome. When you have moisture, when you don't have moisture, you're going to have to go into those other fields. Maybe you can move them to a rental farm like we did. So we did that initially. Then we have had a rental farm for over 20 years. And so we moved the entire herds over there for 50 days and then moved them all the way back to our farm. And then we utilized the rest of it. Right now, because we don't have a rental farm now and we don't have as many cows now, we're basically going, we only have 40 head. Our plan now is to what Greg Judy has described a little bit as grazing up. So we're moving them quick and letting them take maybe 3-4 inches and move. So we're actually speeding things up so we can get 2 grazings within that stockpile phase. We tried it last year. It seemed to work okay, but again, if you got to have moisture. And our strategies are changing because our goals are changing, our life balance, our money, our family time, vacation, and other things we want to do. Okay. Other options that we've done a little bit of, and I know from my friends in Canada who've had a drought, you know, we have limited the stockpile to make it go longer. So instead of, you know, putting them in a field, we might give them a little bit, and then we bring them back to the barn or a place and feed hay. Generally, we won't be back fencing. It does take a little more laneway work and things, but, you know, that's a way to make the stockpile go farther. Renting other land and, you know, sending them over there is an option. Something we haven't tried, but it's certainly people are capable of working with a crop farmer where he can plant the annuals and the livestock complement his operation and yours, and you can come up with a financial package. Back in the earlier days, we actually sent tractor trail loads of cows to Mississippi for the winter and graze, so they were on grass their entire life. It was 26 hours from our house to theirs. It was rough on cows. And then we could take a vacation. And the other possibility is don't do what you can, put on as many cows as you can and forget about stockpiling. You know, whatever makes you more money and helps your soil and do the things you want to do. So basically our weak link, which I have not been able to, you know, I'm still learning from Russ Wilson and others of how do I go from January 15th to April 15th? I don't know how. I don't know what kind of magic crops I got to grow or whatever, because we're in the snow belt. So I'm still looking for answers on that one. You got questions?
Well, we are going to have some questions. Do you want to go rapid fire through your last couple of slides? Because I think they're important.
Well, so most everybody knows that I have a grazing plan and I use it judiciously. It doesn't have to look like this. It can be anything that you can use, but planning it out and having a counsel with another person, and keeping all the things straight is super important. Now I can go back 10 years, 12 years and look at what happened. It's invaluable for me in terms of trying to get a quality of life, good animal performance, and then making quality decisions. I know it's a little piece of paper and I know it's got a few lines, but you got to have a plan. And that's one of those things that I try to get Russ and Greg Judy and others to show us your plan. Like, what does a plan look like? And a lot of times they say, well, here's how you do it. And I'm like, no, I want to see the battle plan. I want to see the recovery rates and all those things. And so we really need to double down on some of that. You really need to, if you're going to do a grazing plan or a grazing chart or monitoring, you got to know your supply and demand. And there are hundreds of resources to figure out cow needs that match with acre needs. I use a simple form, and I took this from Greg Braun because it's super easy. There's tons of other ones, but you got to do a little math. What else you got there?
Well, I'll just add really quickly to this. It's something I should have said at the beginning. You know, one of the questions we got in the registration was, well, how do you know if you have enough land to stockpile, or how much do you put aside?
Oh, yeah.
And something that we're not covering today is, you know, how do you make a forage balance sheet? How do you do that math? But that's absolutely something, you know, Troy, I think you'd agree, you're not going to stockpile until you sit down and make a plan and get your inventory.
So those are easy resources because you can go, the whole nation has the soil web survey from NRCS. You can type your address in and get your soils. Then you can work with your university or, you know, somebody, or you can do it yourself. You can find what your tonnage is, and then you have to keep track of your own records. Like, that's important. It doesn't matter what the soil web survey says you can do. Reality on the ground is what actually counts. So, you know, you got to establish some stuff. I have done my math here, and we're producing about 4.26 tons of dry matter per acre per year on these rotations. And our soil is honey eye, higher lime. It says we could do 5 ton. So I'm getting there. Okay, that's a limiting factor. Here's just a picture of rationing. So, so we have this stockpile. We figured out how much is there and how much the cows weigh. And so usually the first day you put it up, it says we had an acre. It was a little bit too much because we're really into rationing. We don't want to give them, we want to be very efficient with this resource. Then we go, the next day it's a little too short. They took it down too quick. They're balling. And then by the third day, it's just right. So that's it's cowboy math. Yeah, you got to do it 3 times before you get good at it. You got to start. You give them. It's always better to give them too much than too little, is my opinion. And so then once you get your eye and your grazing, you know, it isn't too bad. But you really do need 3 days. You know, you're going to screw it up the first day, screw it up the second day, and by the third day, it's just right. But you can see that's 70 head of cows there. 70 head of heifers on 0.6 acres. So, you know, you take 90 acres, it lasts a while.
I'll tell you a quick interjection of a funny story since we're just blowing it on time. My boss just texted me. We've been talking about making, you know, a calculation spreadsheet so you can just plug in your numbers and get your grazing plan. He just sent me a text and distracted me. So we really got to make that. We got to get on that. So Troy, you're making work for me.
So the other part of that paddock size is no paddocks are perfectly square. You know, they're all kinds of funky. you know, they're squares, they're rectangles, they're triangles. This one is a good one for beginners with maybe smaller acreages where all you need is the side. So I always put this tool in my grazing plan. Dina Brewster came up to help interns with flex netting on small acreages. So all I gotta do is get one side of the square, and you know, again, that's what we're talking about. When you get into bigger acreages and bigger herds and stuff, you're gonna be talking 3-4 acres a whack. So good tool. And so this is just what is that, 7 days worth of pictures of what was happening. So what, you know, the 16th is, you know, it's melting, it's good, and then boom, we get snow, then we get more snow, then it goes, it melts, then it melts again, then here it comes again, and then it melts again, and now we're back. Like it's almost like a shit show. You're just trying to balance. Okay. You do have feed under there, and so one of the tools I did in 2014, and I try to continue to do, is grab a forage test. And so the next slide is the forage test from this time period. And so what you'll see is, like anything else in a pasture, the quality is high, and there's too much protein and not enough energy. So I looked up, and that they call the relative feed value is, let's see, they call it maintenance feed. I say it's a little bit higher than maintenance because there's so much protein in it, but it looks like you need more energy. And so how you're going to get that energy, you feed baleage, you give them more of it. I'm not quite sure because I'm not a ration balancing person, but you got to have the animals that match that. Otherwise, they won't perform. They'll lose weight. And this was an anomaly. So this is crazy, but on December 11th, this sat for 118 days, and it's almost as good as a May pasture. So I don't know what's going on. If I could grow that every year on every field, I'd be doing really well, because that's a good pasture. So what that I've only duplicated that once. So I believe that was a wintering paddock. We'd wintered the year before, so it had a lot of fertility. The plants were probably really healthy, but that rest period you would think would go right downhill with quality, and it actually kept. It stayed really high quality. I don't know. Okay.
Troy, we have a question just about that, about your forage test. Do you, I guess, about monitoring? Do you monitor your stockpile, or do your forage test? How often?
About every couple weeks. Once you can do it for. It's good to do. Practice a little bit, and then you're going to get good with your eye, and you're going to see stuff. Don't highball it. I sent in the knapweed buds and all the crap with it. Try to get a good representative sample. Don't just pick off the best plants. Take what the cows are eating. Even the leaves. Put them in the package just to give yourself a good representative sample. But for $12, it's a good tool. But after a while, you're like, yeah, I can see it. It's good. But again, that is a planned activity. That's only 60 days worth of recovery. That's the kind of stockpile we're trying to grow because we're finishing animals. If we wanted a longer stockpile with higher mass and maybe older feed, you want to start earlier for dry cows, then you're going to be doing things a little bit differently. So this resource page is one that these are all checks all the boxes for me. YouTube's awesome. So you can learn a lot, as much or more from these as what I've flattened my lips at this evening.
Yeah, and I will say we will, a bunch of people asked us if we could make the PowerPoint. They emailed me and asked me if it'll all be available afterwards. And so yes, the recording will be available. We can post the resources as well. So anyone that wants those. And I will roll into questions. I know we're over on time, but like I said, we knew we were going to. So Megan, I don't know if you want to field some questions. If you have questions, please submit them now. What we can do is try to field the ones for everyone that's on that we know for sure is on live right now. And then if those peter out, I do have some that were submitted before. So Megan, I don't know if you want to referee the online questions.
So I got one question popped to me, was when your land base is tight, you know, your cow numbers are tight, you know, you got a lot of cows, not as much land as you need, and then you throw the drought in. And so again, I go back to that. Jim Garish talks about, if you want to extend your grazing and do stockpiling, you have to make it work. You have to come up with a strategy early on. And so if you want to winter graze, then you need to change your stocking rate and your farm to make that happen. It just doesn't happen like that.
So, Troy, I have just one real quick question about someone asked about if there were grazing plans that they could print out and download. And I know that you've had some that are in Excel file sheets and stuff, and maybe we could add it into the resources for this webinar.
So I would also say
Pasture had some.
If you're in any state in the union, there are NRCS and soil and water professionals that do grazing, and so you should be able to access those anywhere and almost every county in the nation or every state. So I don't have to do it. Generally, because I know I've used Vermont's a couple times and Pennsylvania's. They're all pretty similar, but they all have specific differences, whether it's rangeland or, you know, you're in the Midwest, or, you know, you got fescue. And so I would go local to get that information. If you can't find the information that you need, then let us know and we'll find the information for you.
Yeah, and what we can do also is we have been working on, I was alluding to it before, just a plug and chug Excel spreadsheet where you can go and plug in your numbers and it'll spit out your plan for you. So once we finish that up and are ready to roll it out, we can also email it to everyone that's on the registration list, and that'll be another option.
Remember, it's just a cowboy math. It's not, you know, it gets you in the ballpark. It isn't, you know, it helps you, but it's not, you didn't put it on the land yet.
Right.
So someone asked, someone asked about fescue and just what your take was, and I'm not sure where these people are, but they wanted to know what your main reason was and why you didn't want fescue.
So the fescue, the quality of the fescue isn't great in the summer, right? It has endophytes in it, and so then you could say, well, the seed salesman says, well, there's no endophytes in it, but it's still not super palatable for what we're trying to do with finishing animals. And so we would have to change our pasture dynamic, which I've been working my entire life on this dynamic, and it doesn't include fescue. But I'm not against fescue. I would rather have it at somebody else's farm just for October, November, December, January, February, March. So when I was thinking about this question, it's a perfect segue to find someone that wants to graze cattle in the winter, to have a fescue farm specifically to take somebody's animals from October to April. That's what we need. We need it in the Northeast. We need it on the coast. We need partnerships. And so if you can grow fescue and you can do it, then there should be an opportunity, because I don't want to winter cows in the freaking 6-8 feet of snow. When someone even as close as the lower part of Pennsylvania, I mean, lots of times when I go to the PASA conference, there's no snow down there. So they could they could do fescue. So I believe we need a forage chain, and that would be part of it. You could do annuals and other things, but I believe there's some real opportunity for that. I'm just not going to take my land and do that. It's just not as palatable as my nice orchard grass, red clover, white clover, ryegrass pastures.
So Sam, that is pretty much the questions that are coming in.
Okay.
Do you want to ask a few of yours and then come back to me if I've got more?
Yep. I'll ask some that were submitted, and then yeah, as you get live ones, we can roll back to them. So you alluded to this a little bit, but maybe you can expand on it. How do you see stockpiling and bale grazing fitting together in the toolbox? Have you used them in combination?
The answer is I have. And so what has not worked well is not frozen ground. So I've used it in combination, and I have pictures of it as a freaking wreck. So I laid all the bales out, and then I strip grazed, got the stockpile off, and I did the bale grazing, but we had mud. And those bales around it was mud is my bane. It's something I get stressed out about. It drives me absolutely insane. So when they muddy up, I actually started taking the bales and just rolling them out because I couldn't take it. And these were baleage bales, so they weren't like hay bales. So when those 70 cows get around a bale, they just paw it right up. But I see it working well as a combination to add fertility. So you get that great recovery of a stockpile, and then you have the bales there for that extra fertility. And so really, if it wasn't we thought that it's guaranteed to snow here. So we use up the stockpile before the 1st of January because it's a shit show here. So if we knew that we weren't going to get that, we could actually use those bale graze pastures to extend our stockpiling time, which would be a good thing to do. But frozen ground, frozen concrete, grass concrete is awesome when you can get it. And the last bunch of years, we just haven't had it, and it's been miserable trying to do these practices. That's why I'm envious of Greg Judy and some of the others that have fescue and they live in a little bit drier climate. We just don't seem to have that here.
Sam, I do have one question that just came in, which is, do you fertilize at the start of stockpiling if you have a significant legume content?
I don't. I have read several times that depending on your legume content, you don't want to hit too much nitrogen with it. Sam probably knows more about that than I do. Again, you better have rain. But the legume content, so that's a whole nother conversation. Jim has covered it a couple times. Is you can afford to put on a lot of orchard or a lot of clover seed for the same money as your fertilizer, and to grow that organic nitrogen right on your land instead of buying it. So you can go on his book or whatever and probably find that resource. The downside of this clover talk is clover doesn't stockpile that well. And so when I have 40% clover in my pastures, at the moment that we get too much rain, it starts to turn to mush. And cows, we have cows. They don't vacuum very well. And so if we had little sheep and or horses that could get that, cows don't do well with that. So it's sort of worm food, which comes back around where I believe that I have too much legume for stockpiling. And so I'm working hard to change my management to get more grass. because it's the grass that's going to hold up under the snow, not the legume. So there's a fine line there. How do I add it without, buying a lot of seed? And you can, grazing heights is where you can make your management change. If you graze it taller, you're going to have more grass. If you nub it down, you're going to have more legume. So trying to find that grassy balance. I'd rather have less clover for my era of this stockpiling.
Yeah, and I can add briefly, the ratio of your legumes to your grasses is a natural ebb and flow. So when you have lower soil nitrogen, you get more legumes because they can fix their own nitrogen so they can outcompete the grass. And then once you get a big legume population, they're releasing their nitrogen to the grass. So then, the grass, which grows faster and is more aggressive, sort of takes off, uses up all the nitrogen, backs off again. And so you will see this flux over time of legume to grass. If one quick way that you can help just use, competition, like in the biological sense, is if you put on fertilizer, you are going to favor that grass. You are going to enable it to grow a little bit more aggressively and then outgrow your legumes. So it depends on what you want to get out of it. Megan, I don't know if there's any other live questions right now. Otherwise, I'll.
No, go ahead.
So Troy, I know what you're going to say to this question, but I'm going to answer it, or I'm going to ask it for the sake of asking it because it's important. How do you free up land at this time of year to allow stockpiling?
So free up land. So I don't have so much land, so I'm going to manage it differently. So let's see, I'm probably not going to kill this question. So I am understocked for this farm. Okay, so my 100 acres has supported upwards of 110 head for the grazing season. When I was stockpiling and moving cows to rental farms, I had about 70 to 75 head. So I've diminished my stocking. I've diminished my grazing animals down to 40 finishers. So I have a lot more rest. And so this question actually is something you ask in the spring, like, how are you going to make this happen? So then, as luck would have it, which is luck in some respects, is so in June we had 2 inches of rain. July we had 8.6. It's a deal. It's a money rain. So any rain we get now, is with that kind of recovery and not being over, not having too many animals. So I'm giving away that I have too much grass, but I'm going to use it longer. So it's just a strategy. You could put more, people when they come here like, oh my God, you should put 20 more cows on. Yeah, I could, but you don't get it that I need this mass, this 22-foot mass to get around, and then I'm only going to take 3 or 4 inches of it. And so before I used to just set it aside and say, okay, 40 acres there, I'm done, and I'm going to try to graze the other 60. Now I'm going to take little bites. And so if you take little bites off a 12 to 16 inch plant, it's going to regrow in probably a week, that little tip. That's the premise. So I don't actually have to, set aside a bunch of land. I just keep on doing what I'm doing. And again, this is not my idea. This is something I'm learning from Greg Judy. This is stuff that he's talking about. He might be full of crap, but I'm going to go with it. And I also have a gut that it's going to be a later frost. And so if that's true, and I have this timely rain that I'm getting right now, is I can afford to do that. But I can't speak for anybody else. But it is a hard question to answer because you're so tight. You have to add this land in and have animals. And if you're already stocked pretty heavy, you know, you can't just say, well, I'm gonna keep doing it. You've got to add more land or take more cows away or have awesome fertility. I mean, there's only a few things you can actually do, or feed hay in a sacrifice area for 20 days and let the whole farm rest. That's another strategy.
I've got another question that came in. It says, the field we plan to set aside for stockpiling has some mature brown stems that didn't get trampled. Should I clip them off with a mower at this point or leave them be? It was last grazed at the end of last week.
So, oh, that clipping question. Woo! So I was clipping today, in fact, because we have horse nettle and we have knapweed and they're in flower, and they think they're gonna seed and be here next year. And I said, nope. And I did use a little diesel fuel. So what we're trying to do when we do the clipping now is we get everything set back to where in 60 days you're going to have really good grass. But again, the context is, is it worth it? Those little brown stems, you know, are they this tall? You know, lots of times we're clipping to get all the biomass on the ground to absorb any August moisture. So that's another reason. And when you have those stems and sticks and that prickly pear and the knapweed, that's fertilization actually. You're chopping it up, putting it on the ground, because your cows, we can't trample as well as somebody with a lot of cows, or we're not trampling as much as we were in June because our cows can't be landscaped. You know, we're just letting them eat what they want. So we can't use that tool quite as well as we could earlier on in June. But clipping is again, getting it back to vegetative for the next 60 days. They do talk about that everywhere, about either grazing it or clipping it or whatever you got to do to at the start of the stockpile phase to get quality stockpile for October here in the Northeast. I might be full of crap. Somebody could argue that is the wrong answer, but again, your context is what kind of animals need to perform. And if it's an old dry cow, you can afford maybe not to clip it because you don't need that high quality of feed to keep her. Us, we still need rocket fuel going into October, November.
So I'll say quickly, it's 8:27, so I'm thinking maybe we'll go 5, 10 more minutes. I'll talk about this all day, as evidenced by Troy and I's last phone call. What did we talk for, about 3 hours about soil and fertility and grazing? But I mean, maybe the people still on will too, but I'll go over a couple more questions. So if you have questions, you're thinking about submitting them, do them quick because we're gonna run out of time. So, okay, here's a good one. Should I stockpile the grasses in our field waterways? It's 90% orchard grass and the surrounding fields always have runoff.
They're gonna stockpile to use it later, you think?
Well, I think they're asking, you know, should I stockpile grasses in these waterway areas?
I would. Plus the habitat benefit and all that other, all those other soil health and erosion benefits. So we didn't even talk about this little, oh, wait a minute. So in January, I graze my wetlands because they're frozen, and my biologist said that cows once in a while in those areas they punch up, make little holes for the turtles and other things, and the rushes that grow in there have a super high mineral content, because I actually sent a sample to Jerry Bernetti and it came back just off the chart with minerals. and it's the only time that the animals will eat it after the frost. So actually utilizing these rougher areas at the right time, like in August when it's really dry, or in the winter time, you can, for the right reasons at the right time, I think might be a good strategy. So then as a soil and water person, I know that the uptake of nutrients is better served when the grass gets clipped. So, you can let it grow, but eventually you'll want to cut it so the new growth can uptake whatever it's buffering. So that might be part of the answer, perhaps. I'm not sure all the context questions of that one, but that's a roundabout. Yeah, and even woodland, I graze. I only put them in the woods once, and usually during this hot, dry summer when I really need it, and like early winter when they're not going to hurt the trees that much, and then they're out because I don't want to lose my maples and all that other.
So here's more of just a general what is going on in the grazing world question. It's a two-part question. I don't know how much you have experience with the first one. The first part is, does multi-species grazing make winter grazing easier or more difficult? The second part of the question is there anyone that is doing year-round grazing other than the sacrifice field method?
Oh, and the name, so I'll get the second part. So the two people that I know in my region that I look to answers are John Burns, is a farmer in Steuben County, I believe. It may not, he's probably at 300 days. I've seen it. And then Russell Wilson. Russ Wilson, he's on my resource page. I believe he's got 300 days in. And so I keep scratching my head going, well, what am I doing wrong? Why can't I do that? And so again, when I actually look back at my grazing charts, I used to graze 180 days, and now because of people that I've learned from, I'm averaging 232 days. So it's not terrible, but it's far cry from 300. So those guys, other than that, I'm not really sure. Greg Judy is in Missouri. He doesn't live here in New York. So, and he has 6 acres per cow. So it's kind of a deal breaker. I mean, it's good. He has tools. I just don't know folks around here that are at that 300. We need to know who they are because they're the outliers. They have the forage chain. Again, I think some are shipping their animals to Virginia and let them graze fescue. Again, I believe there's still this partnering. What was the first part of the question?
Does multi-species grazing make winter grazing easier or more difficult?
I don't have experience with that. I have seen, so the folks that I have seen do it, the cows stay in flex netting. They're very efficient. It's almost a fencing issue. The sheep are actually pretty good. What I find fascinating about those farms that I've seen, they have workhorses, and so the workhorses are the ones that they for some reason just hate hay. They just want to graze, and so they take their big old foot and they break the pattern and break, and they dig, and then the little sheep come behind them, and then the cows go, oh, can I do that? And so it's kind of an interesting choreography watching the 3 species kind of go at it. I know from fact that my goats, we had dairy goats here, they hate snow. Like they could, as soon as you had snow, it was like a fence. So, but sheep and others, I don't see why other than a fencing issue. Yeah, it's doable, definitely.
Great. I'm gonna scan through this quickly and try to find one last question. I'm gonna try to make it a good one to end out here on. Oh, let's see. 1 second, bear with me.
I have a quick one from online, and I think I know
Great.
the answer to this, Troy, but I'll let you answer it. Do you plant trees in your pastures to silvopasture?
No. I plant trees in my pastures and make shelter breaks. So they're specific for wind and shelter, not cows are not going in there and doing silvopasture.
What species have you been planting?
It may not be right, but tamaracks do really well here, and I do honey locusts, black locusts, and believe it or not, we put in lilac because we had them, and American cranberries done pretty well here. I have a couple of sycamores, but generally those maple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maple.
Okay, so you know what? I lied. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, but I'm going to ask them at once, and then these will be our last ones. So the first question is, at what point do you know or do you think that your stockpiled grass has lost its nutritional value and it's time to feed hay? And then to dovetail into that is, essentially, have you ever left your animals on too long in the winter, or it's gotten too muddy in the late fall and you've seen the consequences of that in the spring?
So the first question is, I monitor the manure. So that's the easiest way to, if it's like a road apple, it's time to do something. Generally, our manure is pretty loose. It's almost like spring around here, which is good and bad. They're getting a lot of protein, not getting enough energy. And so what you see in that triangle of death, by their stomach and their rumen, they get sunk in. Lots of times, if it's getting late, I give them hay, and along with a stockpile. That scratch factor and things. So that's when you sort of supplement. Cows don't normally bawl. When they start bawling, you don't want them to bawl. They need to be not bawling. And I have mucked up more land than I care to share. The hard part is not knowing. A lot of the mud and a lot of the things is cows are just heavy animals, and so if they're going to move, so you're as a manager trying to make a little money at this, and then you're trying to do soil health, and you're trying to give them animal performance, and you're trying to have a family life and all the good things, and so you're trying to balance those moves, and so if you give them too much, then they waste more, but then you don't have as much mud, and then it melts. You have like a 50-degree night, and then all the cows bunch up, and then you got this big pile of mud, and then they don't eat, and then you should have moved them, and then so then most of my issue with stockpiling and this extended grazing has been in the spring of trying to recoup some of the damage. So we don't have a lot of equipment here. So, reseeding, reflattening, redoing, these rough patches, takes a fair bit of work. That's kind of why when I didn't have a picture, that's why I like my bedding areas for animals to go to. So they, along the woods or whatever, I start rolling bales out in one specific spot, and I'll build up 10 bales worth of height and they know that they can come out and graze stockpile, and then they also know that they can go back there and lay down and do their business. Well, in the spring, I can turn that like a compost turn. I can just pick it up with my thing, and it's all right there. So that's how I avoid some of the problems that I've had. But, you know, it takes bedding. You know, it costs money. You have to roll it out. And but I found that that's worked probably better than anything to keep the feet up off the pastures. And again, I wrote about it. I've said it. This perpetual November is really something we have to look at in these sacrifice areas and things, because it never freezes. I say never. It's not freezing. It's freezing and thawing, and that's really hurting our plants. You know, when those cows are impacting that. So you gotta, at some point, we gotta have a conversation of, you really are not helping the land. You know, it's one thing if you're going to till it and, you know, reseed it and do the whole thing, but on a permanent pasture like us, that's our money. We can't be out destroying. And then the plants are like, I can only imagine what a plant is saying when 1 minute it's 20 and it's snowing, and then 3 days later it's 50 and melting, and then the sun comes out and I feel like I want to grow again, and then the cow comes over and steps on me and makes mud, and then it rains the next day, and then you have a hurricane, and then it's a wonder a plant can grow at all. I just feel like there's some impact so I'm at the point now where when that mud and that stuff happens, that's why we have a sacrifice place at the barn. You know, I'm not at all against barns anymore, specifically for this perpetual November or that March time frame, which makes hardly any economic sense to put up a barn. But when your pastures and your fields are getting destroyed by animals because they're out wintering somewhere, a barn might look like a pretty good investment, or some kind of feeding area or someplace hard for this climate that we're in right now. Because again, I'm not seeing this hard freeze, this frost that lasts from Thanksgiving till you know, April 1st. I don't know where it is. It's definitely hampering our management style. Okay.
All right, Troy, thank you so much. Megan, thank you so much. There's actually still a lot of people hanging out with us.
Yeah.
They're Linga Grazing with us.
Nice.
So I'm gonna end the webinar for everybody. It will be posted probably sometime next week, and you'll be able to find it online, and you'll be able to find those resources or re-listen to it, whatever you want to do.
Will we be able to answer? Will people be able to ask questions on that, underneath that webinar?
What we can do is we can get it posted on YouTube, because right now we post it on our UMass Extension website and it doesn't have the questions interface on it. So we can post it on YouTube so people can ask more questions under there if we are good about checking them and answering them. And people can also email me questions, and okay, and I can field them, whether it's to you, Troy, or to the appropriate person in our New England Grazing Network or whatever. Get in touch with me and I can help you get in touch with who you need to talk to.
No grazers left behind.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye. Bye.